What's up guys, Justin here, and this is part 2 to my warrior guide for PvP. In my last video, I covered my gear, how my gems are, and how my reforging prioritization works. And now I'm going to cover pretty much my spec, talents, and glyphs. Spec, as I'm pretty sure I mentioned in my last video, I am an arms warrior. This patch 5.4 is definitely the patch of the arms warrior. You can go like Fury for fun. I have a couple times, that's why I have it dual spec, but if you're serious into it, you want to do the best that you can possibly be, definitely got to go arms warrior. And there's certain abilities that are special to the arms warrior, and I'm going to be covering those real quick. First of all, Mortal Strike. 215% weapon damage, an additional 4k plus, and applies a bleed to it, to the target, as well as reducing their healing, it reduces the effectiveness of their healing for an additional 10 seconds along with that bleed, and generates you 10 rage. So that is definitely the ability that the arms warrior lives by. You're going to be using that on cooldown any chance you get. What it does, as well as it activates Taste of Blood, which will then give you 2 charges of Overpower, which is the next ability I'm going to cover. And Overpower actually reduces the cooldown of your Mortal Strike. So they kind of go off each other in a really, really effective relationship where one benefits the other and keeps your rotation flowing. So then we're going to move on to Overpower. Overpower instantly does 105% weapon damage, and it cannot be blocked, dodged, or parried. So this is definitely an amazing ability to have, specific to the arms warrior. So anytime you go up against, like, say, another warrior with Die by the Sword on, or you're going against a rogue with evasiveness, you're able to go right through their dodges and parries for days. Or, well, not necessarily days, but until your Overpower charges run out. Overpower also gains 1 charge if your special abilities are dodged by an enemy player. So, say you're going up against a rogue and their dodge and everything you got, well, you should be also getting charges of Overpower throughout that battle. But you have to keep up your rage, because each use of Overpower, even though you're granted it, still costs 10 rage. Which isn't really that hard to get, but you just gotta make sure that you're paying attention to your rage bar. So that's definitely a really good power to have. Like I said, works in perfect relationship with Mortal Strike, keeps your rotation flowing, and it keeps your DPS just constantly pumping out. Oh, almost forgot to mention, Overpower also has an increased chance to critical strike. So like I said in my last video, how my gear is set up, it's optimized for crit, makes my Overpower even more likely to crit. So it does 105% weapon damage, and it has a huge chance with my gear, and as well as its default passive ability to have a high chance to crit. My Overpowers crit a lot, and Overpower, with as little rage as it costs and how it just goes off with Mortal Strike, definitely is the best ability to use as constant as you possibly can whenever you have the rage to spend on it. And that's mainly for, like, just constant in the fight damage while you're trying to whittle away at your enemy's health. Then moving on to Slam. Slam is definitely an ability that you're going to want to use when there's an opening to go for a target kill, or you're wanting to do huge burst damage, or you're definitely whenever your Colossus Smash debuff is up, you want to be using this as long as you have the rage. Costs 25 rage, it got super buffed this patch. It does 275% weapon damage, as well as an additional 4,200, almost 4,300 damage onto the target. And if your Colossus Smash debuff is up, does an additional 10% damage onto that. So 285% weapon damage, as well as that bonus damage onto your target while your Colossus Smash debuff is up, which Colossus Smash already reduces, in PvP at least, your enemy's armor by 50%, as well as increases the damage that they take by 4%. So you're doing a ridiculous amount of damage with one slam if your Colossus Smash is up. So it's definitely a really great ability to have. Great ability to use, especially this patch. And like I said, definitely for closing those gaps and doing mass damage. If there's a kill opening to where you can take out an enemy, definitely want to be spamming that slam as much as you can. Another little passive ability with it is when you have sweeping strikes active, which is another ability specific to the Arms Warrior. It's not actually listed in the spec thing, but I have it right here so I can kind of show you the tooltip over there off on the right side. It makes all of your melee attacks while this duration is active. It does 50% damage of that melee attack that you just previously did to an additional nearby opponent. Well, when you use Slam in conjunction with Sweeping Strikes, instead of just hitting one enemy nearby for 50%, it does all enemies within 2 yards an additional 35% of that damage. Sorry. So it does get a little bit pulled back from that 50% and only does 35%, but that's every enemy in the immediate area for 35% damage, which doesn't sound like a lot, but say you have a DK in an RBG, does Gorfien's Grasp, pulls a bunch of people in, and you just start slamming. You're hitting all those people for a ridiculous amount of damage. And if you think about it, that damage is really going to end up adding up because you're spreading it over anybody that's within those 2 yards. And if that Death Knight uses Gorfien's Grasp and you're stacked right on top of them, all of them are going to be right in that area. So you're going to be hitting everybody for that amount of damage. So it's really good if you use it strategically. And that's pretty much what it's used for, especially with how much rage it costs. You got to use it strategically, but if you use it right, use it at the right time, it pays off greatly. Colossus Smash, it's also used for Fury, but it's definitely worth mentioning because it's a major part of the rotation. I kind of pretty much covered it when I was talking about Slam, but like I said, it does a debuff against the enemy's armor. It says in the tooltip 100% of their armor, but in PvP it's debuffed to, from what I'm aware of, 50% of their armor is reduced for 6 seconds. It also weakens the target to where they also take 4% more damage. So not only are you reducing their damage, you're increasing the damage that they take. And the ability itself does 175% weapon damage as well as 4,800 bonus damage on top of it. So not only is it a good debuff, it also does a reasonable amount of damage. So it's definitely another thing that you want to use on cooldown, but at the same time, you don't want to spam it. Because a cool thing is, with Colossus Smash, your overpower, your auto attacks and your overpowers, which are considered strikes of opportunity, will have a chance to completely reset the cooldown of Colossus Smash. So then you can use it, like, if you get lucky, you can use Colossus Smash, use an overpower or an auto attack, and boom, right off the bat it's reset. But to increase your effectiveness of it, definitely want to pay attention to the debuff. Maybe wait till you have 1 second more on it, then slap the Colossus Smash on again, so you have a bigger window of opportunity for their armor to be reduced and for them to take that additional damage. So it's really important to definitely have that up as long as you can and as often as you can. So that's definitely the big abilities that you're going to be looking at in the Arms Warrior spec. I'm going to move on to talents. Talents, starting out with, is Juggernaut. Juggernaut is an ability that just reduces your charges cooldown by an additional 8 seconds. So it makes it to where, as opposed to 20 seconds, you can charge every 12 seconds. And regular amount of rage is generated for each charge that you do. An alternative would be to use double time. Warbringer really isn't really useful, so I'm not really going to talk much about it. If anything, you can read that tooltip real quick and see what it does. Pause the video, but I just really don't find it very worth mentioning. Double time, instead of reducing the cooldown of your charge, it gives you 2 charges. So you can use one after the other, but each charge requires still a 20-second cooldown. And at the same time, you can only generate rage from a charge every 12 seconds. So you might as well, if you're focusing on rage, just go with Juggernaut, which is what you should be doing, because rage is the biggest, it's our resource. It's how we do damage, and you definitely want to be saving up that rage and using that rage for overpowers and slams and any other abilities possible, as well as sweeping strikes. Sweeping strikes takes like 30 rage, and then if they're below 20%, you're going to be wanting to use that rage for execute. So you definitely want to be focusing on generating rage and generating a high amount of it as often as you can. Double time is definitely useful for CC, especially if you use the Glyph of Blitz, which I'll be covering. That I actually do have that, but I don't use double time. But double time is definitely useful for the CC, because that's a 1.5 second stun that has no diminishing return that you can use back to back. But like I said, it's all about how you like to play, how your style is, which charge you prefer. I just personally prefer Juggernaut so I can increase my rage. The next one, pretty much no contest. PvP wise, second wind is the way to go. You go below 35%, every second you're gaining back 3% of your health, and there's no cooldown on it. There's no diminishing return. It's if you are below 35%, you are generating 3% of your health back. Kind of hard to beat, especially in the PvP setting. Next is definitely a pick your play style tree, where I pick Disrupting Shout so I can have a second disrupt on top of my pummel, just because I like having more than one, especially to harass casters. But then there's Piercing Howl, which is pretty much just like an AoE hamstring, same amount of rage cost and everything. And then there's Staggering Shout, which is an AoE, no cost of rage, but if the person is snared, it turns that snare into a root. So it's very good to use, especially if you are constantly using hamstring and you use it in conjunction with Staggering Shout and you root the person. But and I personally, will switch back and forth between Staggering Shout and Disrupting Shout depending on the fight. It's all situational. It's all how you like to play your character. So I'll just leave it at that. Next up is the Bladestorm tree. And I use Bladestorm because it definitely got quite the good buff this patch. It's a lot more viable than it has been in the past few patches, and it's just really strong this patch. A lot of warriors are using it and using it to great success. 180% weapon damage every second for 6 seconds, and it is uninterruptible, undisarmorable. It's just constant stream of damage that you're just doing, and during the course of this, you can use any shout ability that your warrior can use. So you can use Intimidating Shout and fear all the enemies around you. Say you combine it with Bloodbath, which is an ability later on down in the tree, and you are snaring everybody. You can use Staggering Shout to root everybody and keep them in place. There's so much you can do with Bladestorm as far as then complementing it with shouts. It's all, like I said, depends on how you like your playstyle, how you like to do it. The alternative to that is Shockwave. Shockwave, a lot of people still, have been having a lot of success with and continue to have success with. But like I said, it's all playstyle based. In a cone, 10 yards, it does a 4-second stun on anybody caught in the cone, as well as does a good amount of damage, 30k damage to all the enemies caught in that cone for 4 seconds. And if it hits more than 3 opponents, it's a 40-second ability, but if it hits more than 3, it 3 or more, I should say, cuts the cooldown in half, reduces it to 20 seconds. So it's a really good CC to have, in especially in big group settings. Next tree is the pretty much the tree where I would say in this patch, Mass Spell Reflect is definitely the way to go. Unless you're really that concerned about your ally that you're playing with. Safeguard used to be the meta because not only would it reduce the damage taken by your ally by 20%, but it also got you out of all movement and pairing effects that were on you at that moment. So pretty much people would use like the intervene to banner or intervene to ally with Safeguard, and it would break them out of movement and pairing effects. But in this patch, they changed it to where now intervene as its own ability gives you that ability to get out of movement and pairing effects. So it almost makes Safeguard obsolete, and the benefits of having a second reflect are just too important to pass up. So I definitely use Mass Spell Reflect, so then not only could I reflect stuff off myself, but any of my allies in the area also are reflecting, you know, the next casting ability that comes into them. So it definitely works out perfectly in the arenas. For example, when CC is being cast, you're not sure who's casting it and where they're casting it to. You can just slap on the Mass Spell Reflect, and that'll just be reflected right back to the enemy and give you a good window of opportunity if they're not expecting it for you to clean house, take someone out, you know, however you decide to handle it. And last but not least, the final tree. Definitely all three abilities completely viable. It doesn't really matter what you choose. All of them are extremely useful. There's no one bad or one good. The three of them are Avatar, transform into Colossus, so your dude gets big for 24 seconds, breaks all roots and snares, increases your damage dealt by 20% for that entire duration. Only drawback, it's a 3-minute cooldown. So but it does share a cooldown with your Recklessness and Skull Banner, so you can set that into a really big, hard-hitting macro for every 3 minutes. But that's only if, you know, you have the patience to wait 3 minutes to do, you know, to pretty much go completely ham. Next ability, excuse me, is Bloodbath. Bloodbath, this patch, a lot of people have been using in conjunction with Bladestorm because each Bladestorm tick actually activates Bloodbath, and it will hit several targets. What Bloodbath does is for the next 12 seconds of duration when you activate it, every special attack that you use, you know, such as Bladestorm, does an additional 30% damage as a bleed for 6 seconds, and while the target is bleeding, they move 50% less at less speed. So pretty much not only is it a additional damage boost, a bleed, it also slows the targets. So what a lot of people do is they'll combine Bladestorm, Bloodbath, and Staggering Shout together. So it's like they're Bladestorming with Bloodbath, slowing everybody, doing massive damage, and since they're all slowed and you have several targets slowed, you also have Staggering Shout, which will then root every single one of those people that just got slowed and keep them in that range of your Bladestorm to where you're maximizing your damage, you're hitting everyone hard, and just really getting a good benefit out of all those abilities. But that's for like big group settings, and you know, that's, you know, it's all about how you know, like I said, how you like to play. Right now, I'm playing with Stormbolt. Stormbolt does 125% weapon damage. It also has a little ability that's mainly for PvE, does 500% weapon damage to, you know, enemies that are permanently immune to stun, such as like raid bosses. But as far as I'm aware, that doesn't work on anyone in PvP. So we're going to stick with it. Does 125% weapon damage, but it also does a 4-second stun. And the greatest part about it is every warrior ability, except for like Heroic Throw, is melee range. And even Heroic Throw is kind of weak. It's just like kind of like an extra, let me do some extra damage to you at range. But what Stormbolt is, it has 30 yards. So you can be in someone's face and their healer off somewhere in Buku, who knows where. But if they're in line of sight, say you have like a focus macro with your Stormbolt, you chuck that Stormbolt 30 yards away to the healer hiding out over on the side. They're stunned, gives you a good window of opportunity to then do some major damage onto your target and possibly claim a kill and then move on to your next target. I personally like it a lot, especially in conjunction with Bladestorm, because Bladestorm, I'm doing constant damage, and with Stormbolt, I also have a really awesome dedicated CC. What people tend to do a lot is they'll combine Shockwave Stormbolt, so they're focusing on CC, and others are combining Blade Storm and Bloodbath to focus on lots of damage. But I kind of mix it up, and I've found that it actually kind of works for me in my playstyle to where I have a good amount of constant damage and also a solid CC. So then, that's all the talents. Move on to glyphs. Glyphs, like I said before, Glyph of Blitz, Charge, stuns an additional 2 targets for 1.5 seconds. No diminishing return, so say you do have double time, boom, boom. 1.5 seconds each time you use it, and for 3 targets. Interrupting them and stunning them for 1.5 seconds. It's a great glyph to have, but also very interchangeable with whatever you want. Next I use is Glyph of Death from Above, which pretty much your heroic leap cuts it in half, the cooldown of it. So it's an ability that not only can you get away from your enemy, but you can also close the gap, and also when you land, it does damage in an AoE. So it's definitely a good thing to have, especially as far as warrior mobility goes, to be able to use it and move around and chase after whoever's running from you, or say you're in a tight spot and you need to get away. It's good to have that as often as you possibly can. Then I have my last glyph, which is Glyph of Bull Rush, which each charge I do generates an additional 15 rage on top of the rage that I generate from it, which is invaluable, especially considering that's our primary resource pool. We go off rage. So having that additional rage, that's an additional overpower. That could potentially be an additional slam depending on how much rage I have. And sometimes that additional ability is what makes or breaks a fight when you're going up against someone with very little health. So that's how I set up my guy as far as my spec talents and glyphs. Pretty much the way I spec it is it all goes off of each other. It all flows to a certain degree to where I will be done with one thing, be able to go right on to something else. I'm never waiting on one ability or another. I always have control over the fight, whether I'm doing massive damage or I'm keeping them under control. And I'll show you exactly how in the next video, where I'll be covering exactly what abilities I'm using, how I organize them, and exactly what my rotation is personally as far as PvP goes. So definitely check out the next video. We may have a link for it somewhere around here. I don't know, Tyler, if you're gonna edit it, but somewhere around here. Click on something, and maybe you'll go to the next video. So I hope you guys enjoy this. Hope you guys are. I'm glad you guys are being patient with me, and I hope that this is helping you guys out in any way that I possibly can. Leave comments, subscribe. Let us know how we can better improve and how we can help you guys further in your search to be a better gamer. So thanks for watching. I'll catch you guys later.